Hello, I'm Mack Payne. These days I am a writer, speaker, and publisher. A while back I wrote a book about my experiences in Vietnam and called it Vietnam Veteran Memoirs. It talked about my 2 years in country and the year and a half in between. I call it a me book because it primarily looked at my experiences during the Vietnam War. It turned out to be an inspirational book because it inspired me to do things I otherwise would not have done. The first inspiration was to become a speaker. I went out across the Southeast from North Carolina to Colorado to speak about my book and the Vietnam War generation. After a while, I began to notice everywhere I went to speak, there would always be Vietnam veterans in the audience, and we would get together afterwards and start talking about our days in Vietnam. The more I heard so many new and interesting stories about Vietnam, I began to think, it's a shame more people can't hear these stories. I began to think about other ways to get these stories out to more listeners. About that time, I was introduced to podcasting, and the rest is history. It was the most effective way to broadcast news about the Vietnam generation, and so my podcast, Vietnam Veteran News, was born. I proceeded to set up a podcast studio in my home office with real, live broadcasting equipment, including a professional microphone with mic boom, a PV sound mixer, and a high-class Roland audio recorder. The podcast website is VietnamVeteranNews.com, and the podcast is also found in the iTunes Store in the podcast section. My podcast airs stories about the war and interviews with Vietnam veterans. I began to accumulate a collection of very interesting stories, and again, I look for additional ways to share these stories with more people. Then I was inspired again. My inspiration this time was to put down some of those interviews in a book to help spread the word about this wonderful Vietnam War generation. One of the conversations included in the new book is with the incredible Dave Reaver. He not only survived terrible wounds he received in a battle on the Vam Cote River in Vietnam, but today he runs the worldwide Reaver Foundation out of Fort Worth, Texas, that helps thousands of deserving veterans and civilians around the world. Another story in the book is that of Melvin Page. He served with the 25th Infantry Division in Vietnam with bravery and valor. He continued to serve his community in Kingston, Tennessee after his military service. His story will amaze you and delight you at the same time. Another conversation in my new book is with Steve Suttles. Steve was a sniper in Vietnam with the U.S. Marines. He tells the inside story of the little-known world of a combat sniper and all the things he had to contend with in the mountains and jungles of Vietnam. Conversations with Vietnam Heroes is a collection of interviews from my podcast that will give you the insider story about the Vietnam War. This book will also illustrate the greatness of the Vietnam War generation. Today, I am making a special announcement. To help promote my new book, I have decided to give away a chapter from my book to 1,000 lucky people. To get one, all you have to do is go to the website listed below. You will receive Chapter 4 of my book. It is a conversation with none other than Steve Suttles, the U.S. Marine sniper. I guarantee you will enjoy his story. Just go to VietnamVeteranMemoirs.com/request.html, and in no time, you will be reading a chapter from Conversations with Vietnam Heroes. Thanks for listening.